So today I've got a slightly different video for you guys, because I want to talk about an injury that I'm currently working through recovery on. And my hope is that by taking you through the process that I'm working through right now, it can give you some tips on how to stay healthy. Because after all, the best ability is availability. And there's nothing that's worse than having to miss games from injury. And to keep things simple, I've broken my recovery strategy down to 3 phases so you can start wherever you're most comfortable. And to give you some background, I play in a fairly competitive 8v8 league every Wednesdays. And it was during one of those games 3 weeks ago that I suffered a left hamstring injury when I was going for a shot. And honestly, the injury itself was one of the more painful ones I've experienced. After the initial injury, I was limping for about 2 days and I couldn't put any weight on my left leg whatsoever. I also had a really limited range of motion during this time, so even doing simple things like sitting down and standing up were really difficult. So unfortunately, as soon as I got the hamstring strain, I knew that I was going to be out for a while. But I also knew that I wanted to get back to the pitch as soon as possible. And that brought me to my first phase in the recovery process, which was addressing the pain. Now, the pain associated with an injury is really frustrating, not just because it takes you out of the game, but it can also just make things difficult in day-to-day life. And if you do happen to suffer from a really serious injury, such as a grade 3 muscle tear or a knee injury like an ACL or MCL tear, you should definitely seek professional medical help as soon as possible. But for smaller injuries and minor muscle tears, there's a few things that can help ease that process. And that brings us to one of the most important things in the recovery process, which is sleep. I think a lot of people, especially athletes, don't always realize how important sleep is. But you really need to be getting somewhere between 7 to 9 hours of sleep on a regular basis. Because it's important to remember that while you sleep is when your body is going to be repairing itself. Enough sleep and a healthy diet should always be at the core of your recovery, and then everything else you add on to that is going to be supplemental. But I'm not going to just leave you with that. There are a few other things that you can do to help ease the pain in the recovery process. Some people use Advil or Tylenol just to help ease the pain after an initial injury. I think it's good to use, just make sure you only use it in moderation. And for a muscle injury, you can also use something similar to Icy Hot to help ease the pain. I used this after my hamstring injury, and it was definitely pretty helpful just in numbing the initial pain that I felt at the back of my leg. And now, depending on your specific injury, it could be anywhere from a few days to a few weeks before you can just walk around pain-free. For my hamstring injury, it was about 3 days before I could start to walk around at just normal capacity, and that's when I moved on to the next phase, which was active recovery. Now, active recovery is defined as low intensity exercise. And the purpose of active recovery is to circulate blood and nutrients throughout your body so that your muscles and tendons can heal faster. And not only is active recovery great for working through your injury, but it can also help you bounce back stronger. But the number one rule of active recovery is to never work through pain. Because if you push yourself too hard, you can easily end up re-injuring yourself. As far as my favorite active recovery tips, I personally really like walking just because it's so easy to do and it's really low impact. It just helps get my body moving and I can do it without much strenuous effort. But if you're not a huge fan of walking, cycling and swimming are also great alternatives. Then if you're ready to progress past some light cardio, you can move to some isometric exercises. Isometrics are basically just when you statically contract a muscle. Now for my hamstring injury, what I focused on were glute bridges as well as single leg glute bridges. Now as the name would suggest, this is predominantly a glute exercise with just some assistance from the hamstrings. But after not doing much exercise for about a week, this was a really good way to ease back into some lower body strength work. It was also a good way for me to gauge how much pain I still had in my hamstrings. And then there's a host of other resistance and strength exercises that I used in my recovery process. One of my favorites I used was banded kickbacks, and this one's really easy. All you need to get started is a resistance band. This was another exercise that worked both the glutes and the hamstrings, and it was a really great way to lightly load my muscles. Then as I entered my second week of recovery, I did some slightly more challenging exercises. I did some deep kettlebell squats with relatively light weight just to get a really good stretch in my lower body. And the key, as with any other exercise you're doing while you're recovering from an injury, is definitely to go lighter than you normally would so that you're not putting too much stress too quickly on your body. Then along with the squats, I also did some dumbbell Romanian deadlifts. Now RDLs are essentially a hip hinging movement as opposed to squats, which are a knee bending movement. And they're also going to be a hamstring dominant exercise so you can get a really deep stretch. And they're also really useful if you want to target one leg at a time. You can do that by putting one leg in front of the other and then slowly lowering the weight down. This was great for helping me isolate my weaker left hamstring. And then if you have access to the machine, leg curls are another great way to directly target the hamstrings. They essentially isolate the muscle without requiring any stabilization from the rest of the body. And what I found unsurprisingly was that my left leg was considerably weaker than my right. So what I did was just bring the weight almost all the way down to 0 and just do reps really slowly. And I also focused on getting as much range of motion as possible each time. And if you don't have access to a leg curl machine, you can also do Nordic curls. This is also going to be an isolated hamstring exercise, but you're just going to need a partner to hold down your ankles or do them against the edge of your bed. And while you continue to incorporate active recovery strategies as well as strength training, that's when you're gonna enter phase 3, which is getting back to the pitch. Now, speaking from experience, getting back on the pitch is definitely the most dangerous time as far as possibly re-injuring yourself. And that's just because football is a very demanding game that can be tremendously hard on your body, especially if you're the kind of player that wants to give it their all every single time they step out on the pitch. While that's an amazing attribute to have as a player, it can definitely make you more prone to re-injury. So what I would recommend when you get back out on the pitch is to start with an individual training session. This is going to give you a really controlled environment where you can just test things out slowly. And now it's more important than ever that you focus on getting a really good dynamic warm-up in. So high knees, leg swings, back kicks, karaoke, anything that you need to get all the muscles in your lower body warmed up, make sure you get those in. For me, it'll take me a minimum of 5 to 10 minutes before I'm completely warmed up after I enter the field. Then I know a lot of people are big advocates of static stretching, and I actually do like static stretching, but I'll usually hold off until after my workout before I do static stretching. Then at the end of my warm-up, I also like to do a really quick sprinting drill. This is where I'll set up cones about 10 to 20 yards apart, and then I'll do one sprint where I'm at 50% speed, another at 75% speed, and then a final run at 100% speed. And then obviously there's about a million different dribbling drills that you can choose from, so you can always do what works best for you, but I'll walk you through my favorite. And the reason I like this particular drill is because it has you move at a variety of tempos. So you're gonna start by setting up 4 cones, each about 5 yards apart. Then you're gonna dribble from the first cone to the second cone, taking really small touches, moving at a controlled pace. Then once you get back to the first cone, you're gonna move from the first cone to the third cone, dribbling with slightly heavier touches, moving at about a medium pace. Then finally, you're gonna dribble with your strongest touches possible while still keeping the ball under control from the first cone all the way to the 4th cone. Imagine dribbling as if you're on a breakaway. And then after you get back to the first cone, that would be 1 set completed. And you can do a ton of variations with this drill. You can do your right foot and then your left foot only. You can do an inside of the foot turn at the cone, an outside of the foot turn, a Cruyff turn. You can really change it up however you want. And as far as passing goes, when I'm training individually, I like to just find a wall and just do some really simple, short, controlled passes. Then when it comes to shooting, you also want to be really careful. Because I know when I get to a field, it's really appealing to just take tons of shots on goal, especially if I have an open net to shoot on. But repeatedly taking shots, especially shots from outside the box, can put a lot of stress over time on your lower body. So if you're like me and you're recovering from a hamstring injury, I would definitely recommend limiting the shots that you have. And above all else, just listen to your own body. The recovery process can be really frustrating, but with enough patience, you'll find yourself back on the field before you know it. So to wrap things up, don't be afraid to incorporate some activity into your recovery process. But remember to always go at your pace and don't try to rush back when it's too soon. So that is gonna do it for this video. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever struggled coming back from an injury and what tip helped you the most. Also, I just got some new boots in and I'm really excited to bring some more reviews in the upcoming weeks. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.